Hello. My name is James Vanié, and I'm here today to talk to you about Kumii. So these are my dog tags, and when I was in the Army, I wore them every single day for about 4 years. And if you look closely, you can see inscribed on them the Army values. And those are really important to me because I was a sergeant at the time, and so I was in charge of my team, in charge of maintaining their morale. If morale was high, we could do anything. We could stay up for days on end in extreme environments. We could deploy, literally anything. If morale was low, then it could be potentially dangerous, perhaps more so than the situation that we are already in. So I took these values and I moved to New York City. I certainly had my perspectives and I had experience, but none of that could have prepared me for my first job in New York City. I just remember getting these passive-aggressive emails from my boss, and these weren't things that we were discussing in person, so this eventually created a dissonance in between him and I that eventually proved to be irreparable. So it took me up until I got into this program to understand what that was. It was a lack of psychological safety, which is our ability to take interpersonal risks with one another. And Amy Edmondson, she is a instructor at Harvard and has done a prolific amount of research around psychological safety. And she says that it's essential to creating effective learning environments. So over the last few months, that's exactly what I've done. I've done facilitated meetups. I've done classes and worked with organizations to understand how to build psychological safety around communities. I've also had a lot of fun doing it, taken a lot of selfies, and also have taken an improv class to understand the value of saying yes and. So Kumii is an HR system, and the way that it works is it's taking a company's corporate values and thinking about the contextual moments to apply those to a situation. For example, we are an inclusive company, yes, and we do not call women girls in the workplace ever. So for today, I'm going to be talking about the Kumii Slack bot, which is a smaller feature in the broader system. So the way that it works is that employees are telling Kumii about their basic interactions with other people on the team. The team leads and managers are getting weekly reports on how they can do better. And each week, each individual within a company is getting sent personalized podcasts based on their needs. So I'm going to illustrate this with a short fiction, design fiction, by talking about Cambria. She is an employee at a company, and she's working on a project. And this is the way that projects generally look. There's the discovery phase, and then we move over to deployment. And then from the top to bottom, we have the different levels of an organization that we usually interface with. So Cambria is having this conflict with her boss, Maurice. When she's presenting her work to him, he is just tearing it apart in a almost defensive way. He's a hothead. And at this point, Cambria doesn't know what to do because this is her boss, right? So she reports this to Kumii. And she says that she's uncomfortable defending her work. And so Kumii takes that into consideration. So the next meeting that arises when Cambria and Maurice are meeting, Kumii is making a recommendation to help Cambria overcome that conflict. So now we can jump into the Slack interface and see what that looks like. Kumii is sending Cambria an article from HBR on how to defend her work. And granted, this is a long article, but it's been condensed down to the three most important points. And Kumii is always looking for feedback on whether or not the information that it's sending is helpful. So back to that podcast that I mentioned. At the end of each week, Kumii is looking at the challenge areas that Cambria is going through, as well as the challenge areas other members on the team are expressing about her. She picks number 3, which is dealing with people who don't pay you full attention. Let's hear how a clip of that sounds.
I personally found it to be rude. And I said, "Are you listening to me?" And I said it just in that tone. And then he stops typing and he says, "Regine, don't be an asshole to me. I asked you to do blah, blah, blah," and he's yelling. And I said to myself, I don't know what's going on with him right now, but this has nothing to do with me.
Okay, so the full podcast is 2 minutes, and it's on full display at the gallery. And basically what Regine wraps up with, the person who is speaking, is that we need to take small steps to overcome these conflicts. So how does Kumii work? So organizations are defining their values, similar to the inclusivity example that I mentioned. With each value, there are arguments that are supported. So below, you would define what inclusivity means in a company, and Kumii is using that to ask questions about the interactions between individuals. Kumii is integrated with all of your existing tools. So we're thinking about integrating this with Google Calendar, Gmail, Trello, all the things that employees are already using. And there's no need to wait for Kumii to send you recommendations. There's an interface that you can go into to find the resources that Kumii is sending you. And managers also have their own interface that captures the company values, the psychological safety report, and weekly insights. So Maurice isn't off the hook, right? He's the one who is creating a lot of this conflict. So what does that journey look like for him? He's going to get a recommendation from Kumii based on the psychological safety report and team values, and he moves into that interface, the one we just looked at. And within that, we see the company values. And this is everything that the aspirational goals that the company said that they want, and how the actions align to those goals. And here we have the psychological safety report. Here, Kumii is asking 2 questions. Do you feel psychologically safe? And do you feel that you're in a supported or hostile environment? And here, this is the piece that might be most helpful for Maurice. It is generated by natural language processing, and it's basically giving Maurice an insight as to what his employees are saying about him and how he can improve on that. So as Regine says in her in the podcast, it takes small steps to overcome these challenges. And what Kumii is doing is creating provocations around conflict that individuals are having so that they can overcome that in small steps. I've done tons of research around this topic, and there are a lot of resources out there that exist. But what I'm finding is that there's not too many products or services that are meeting the user or the employee in this example in the moment. That one. So does this work? Well, yes and no. I've been prototyping this with a few different organizations, So Harlem being one, and I've been working with them face-to-face and also through messaging. And what I'm finding is that, similar to those dog tags that I mentioned, there is value and merit in materializing the conflicts that we have. They help overcome the problems eventually. Thank you.